Now, on to more pleasant things. I'm going to place you in your new home. Try to run again, and I'll destroy your pitiful planet. Did you hear that?
The time has finally arrived. Saints Row, as we know it, comes to an end. After the huge success of Saints Row III, both veterans and newcomers eagerly awaited what Volition had planned for their inevitable fourth entry. After 2 years filled with studio shakeups, we finally got Saints Row 4, another major departure from the series' roots. Like the third, this game was met with a generally positive reception at launch, but over time, a vocal part of the fanbase has labeled it as one of the weakest entries, outside of the 2022 reboot. This raises the question, is Saints Row 4 really a bad game? In this long-awaited video, we're taking one last trip to Steelport to explore whether this game should have never seen the light of day, or if it's a fitting epilogue to the series we've come to love. Out of all the Saints Row games, Saints Row 4 is the one that seemed to suffer the most from studio interference. This all started after the release of Saints Row III, when work began on what was originally dubbed Saints Row Part 4. Meanwhile, an expansion called Enter the Dominatrix, initially announced as an April Fool's joke, was also in development. But this is where the problems began. THQ is facing financial troubles, and its president, Jason Rubin, encouraged Volition to take elements from the expansion and turn it into a full game. A few months later, the company announced that they would be canceling Saints Row Part 4 and turning their expansion into that full game. When THQ filed for bankruptcy in early 2013, Volition was sold to Koch Media, and with the help of their brand, Deep Silver, Saints Row 4 was officially announced. Regarding the series' evolution, creative director Steve Jaros explained to Polygon that each game had a different intention behind it. The first game was inspired by hip-hop music videos, the second pushed the series' outlandishness and irreverence a little further, the third went all out, and the fourth introduced the supernatural and superpowers. Senior producer Jim Boone recalled reviews asking whether the series could be more over the top than Saints Row III, and he took that as a challenge. This time around, the team focused more on fun than simply trying to outdo themselves, which I believe worked in this game's favor. In terms of development, Saints Row 4 had the shortest production cycle in the series. The time between Saints Row 1 and 2 was just over 2 years, while the time between Saints Row 2 and the third was a little over 3. For Saints Row 4, they had just under 2 years. A development cycle that short might have been manageable during the 6th and early 7th generations, but this late in the console lifecycle, a development period like that can be seen as aggressive. Still, this tight schedule brought a certain level of focus to the studio as the entire team was dedicated to this one project. Saints Row 4 dropped on August 20th, 2013 for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. It's worth mentioning that this was only a couple of months before the release of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, although it would eventually get ported to those consoles in early 2015, along with ports to the Nintendo Switch in 2020 and the ill-fated Google Stadia in 2021. Notably, it was released just ahead of the highly anticipated Grand Theft Auto V, which hit shelves a month later. The marketing for this entry was unique, though not quite as flashy as Saints Row 2 or the third. What caught gamers' attention was the super dangerous Wad Wad edition. This special edition of the game cost a small sum of $1 million. I've seen my fair share of over-the-top collector's editions, but this one easily takes the cake. The bundle included random luxuries like plastic surgery, a spy training day, a new Toyota Prius with a year of insurance, and much more. At least you got the game though, right? Saints Row 4 also faced some controversy in Australia. With the new video game rating system released in 2013, this unfortunately meant Saints Row 4 was refused classification. It was the first game to be banned under this new guideline as well. The ban was due to 2 reasons: the inclusion of the alien anal probe weapon and the use of alien narcotics in the optional Girls Night Out mission. Now, I don't really want to get into the political or social uproar that these particular reasons would cause, but I do find the ban a bit extreme given that this entry is arguably the tamest in the series. I do believe the game was eventually released in Australia, but it was heavily censored. If you know more information about this, please comment down below. Upon release, Saints Row 4 garnered a fairly positive reception, with reviews landing in the 70s and 80s across all 3 consoles. While the user score was a bit lower, it was still in line with previous entries. The game sold over 1 million copies in its first week, though Volition hasn't released total sales figures beyond 2013. With all of this in mind, I am fascinated to dive back into Saints Row 4. I first played it in middle school and had a blast back then. But now that I played through every game up to this point, it was interesting looking at Saints Row 4 through a different lens. Ask anyone in the Saints Row community about 4 and it wouldn't be surprising to see it ranked toward the bottom. However, I have seen a bit more love thrown its way in recent months. While I can see where the criticism comes from, I honestly enjoyed my time here. But let's dive into why that is. For this video, I played Saints Row 4 through the re-elected version that was released for the PS4 and Xbox One. I almost considered playing on the Nintendo Switch, but I wanted those trophies. There was some whiplash going back to 2013 era graphics after spending so much time in an upscaled version of Steelport that we got in the Saints Row III remaster. But when comparing it to the original version of Saints Row III, the graphics are pretty much on par. It's worth noting that the re-elected version does play at 60 frames per second, only dropping to 30 during one particular section after I had finished the story. With the game coming out so close to the release of what was at the time next-gen consoles, the team didn't devote much time to improving the game's graphics, which I didn't find to be a total deal breaker. The character models and visual effects still look fantastic, but when it comes to the city, Steelport continues to feel bland, even though we're in a simulation. This could have been an opportunity to do something wild with the city. I'm jumping the gun a bit here, but given the powerful arsenal of weapons and powers we get, something I would have liked to have seen was an increased level of destructibility similar to Volition's other franchise, Red Faction. I know that's a stretch given the limited development cycle, but anything to make the reused map more exciting would have been welcome. Steelport feels more like set dressing this time around, especially since we spend so much time zooming around the map at breakneck speeds. That doesn't mean the city isn't without its charm. While there's no day-night cycle, which might be a negative for some, it does make the city feel more vibrant. Like Saints Row III, the city is bathed in neon signs that light up the night. Plus, I find nighttime fits the vibe this game is going for, although it does switch to daytime once you complete the game. While we are on the same map, there's towering alien architecture, most of which we can climb, and a lot of action takes place on rooftops, giving the city an increased level of verticality. There are also plenty of intentional glitches when roaming the city, constantly reminding us that we're in a simulation. NPCs and buildings will pixelate, characters' bodies stretch awkwardly, some walk upside down, and eyeballs grow to ridiculous sizes. This all helped to give Steelport some much needed personality. Then of course there's you, the boss, who can be customized into whatever you imagine. The customization suite is as expansive as ever, with new hairstyles, taunts, and compliments to choose from. I stuck to a similar character from the last game, only occasionally switching up the hairstyles. However, I did change my outfits a lot, and Saints Row 4 continues to offer a ton of variety in that department. All the usual stores are here, except now we have Planet Zen, which is essentially Planet Saints. Most of the clothing options are new and fit the game's themes, allowing you to dress up as a superhero, Uncle Sam, a bounty hunter, or a freaking Jedi. There are plenty of options to choose from, and I found myself constantly jumping between stores to buy something new or heading to the gateways to equip them. Gateways act as your new crib, giving you access to vehicles, gain customization, and a way to warp back to the real world. That's pretty much it. There's no actual home base to customize, which is disappointing but makes sense in context of the situation. Speaking of customization, let's talk about that voice cast. Troy Baker and Laura Bailey once again knock it out of the park as the male and female voices of the boss. Robin Atkin-Downs and Ken Michael return as male voices, but Tara Platt and Rebecca Santabria have been replaced by Sumali Montano and Diane Michelle. I couldn't find any information on why these two were switched, but since I've always stuck with Laura Bailey, I can't comment on whether this was the right decision. Instead of the zombie voice option from Saints Row III, you can now choose Nolan North to voice your character.
Surprised Zinyak went back to the well and hid this inside a broken shillelagh again.
By this point in the series, you guys know I prefer the female option, but I almost considered playing the entire game as a male just for Nolan North. Thankfully, you can save your custom characters, so I was able to swap between the two throughout my playthrough. The rest of the voice cast includes some new faces along with major returns that were a pleasant surprise. JB Blanc voices the British alien overlord Zinyak.
Why do you humans enjoy leaping so much?
Rebecca Reedy plays Asha.
I'm sorry, is this a counter-terrorist operation or a Saints flow shoot?
And Michael Yurchek is Sid.
Very interesting. It seems...
They were all excellent additions to the voice cast and fit perfectly into the Saints Row universe, with Zinyak and Sid standing out as personal favorites. One of the more interesting additions is Keith David, who plays Keith David.
Do you want to be the president who cured cancer or the president who solved world hunger?
While it's funny to hear characters constantly mention how he sounds like Julius Little, the character he voiced in previous games, it feels like his inclusion is mostly used for this gag. Still, he does deliver a solid performance, particularly at the beginning and end of the game. Now, while we're on the topic of returning characters, this is what genuinely surprised me. Benjamin King, Tanya Winters, Mero, DJ Veteran Child, and many more return for Saints Row 4 and are still as fantastic as they were in their respective games. Unfortunately, not all the original voice actors could return. Terry Crews now voices Benjamin King, taking over from Michael Clark Duncan, who sadly passed away a year before the game's release. While I miss Duncan, Crews does a good job filling in for one of my favorite characters from Saints Row. His character has been completely transformed since the first game, so I felt it was appropriate in this case.
Not when you say it publicly.
You're more fun as a gang leader.
We have a country to run. Fun isn't part of the equation.
Tanya Winters, who was originally voiced by Mila Kunis, is now portrayed by Ursula Tahirian.
Well, well, Benjamin. Time for you to die with some dignity.
See, the thing is, Mila Kunis has such a distinct voice that the change was a bit jarring, but Tahirian does a solid job with what little screen time the character gets. As for returning characters from Saints Row 2, Fun Shandy is the only character with a new voice actor. Jennifer Jules Hart takes the mantle and perfectly captures the mannerisms that Elijah Dushku provided back in 2008 for arguably everyone's favorite version of Shandy. While I really do wish they could have gotten Dushku back to keep everything consistent, there's no questioning that Hart does an amazing job in this role.
Well, evidently I've become a total frigid bitch, so I just wanted to know what's up.
Everyone from Saints Row the Third is still here, so Josh Burke and Matt Miller sound just like you remember. But I want to highlight Kenzie. Natalie Lander is given much more to work with here as her character takes the lead in many parts of the game. Seeing her step up and take charge easily made her one of my favorite characters to come from the later Saints Row games, and that's all due to Lander's stellar performance. The core gameplay formula of Saints Row 4 stays true to its predecessors, with third-person combat that feels as smooth as ever and is enhanced by a creative array of weapons. Some of my personal favorites include the Black Hole Gun, Abductor, Inflator Ray, and of course, the Dubstep Gun. Seriously, what genius came up with a gun that shoots dubstep? With the new weapons also comes a smart, new way to upgrade them. Rather than leveling up weapons as a whole, you can now upgrade individual components, so if you want to increase the clip size or damage separately, you have that freedom. The weapon perks are also unlocked independently, letting you dive into the fun stuff right away. Other than these changes, the gunplay remains largely the same, so there's no need to dwell on that too much. What we do need to talk about though is the biggest shakeup in gameplay, the superpowers. While they're undeniably fun, their inclusion within the series might rub some fans the wrong way. However, if you break it down, there are 8 different powers split into 2 categories, navigation and offensive. Navigation powers include super sprint and super jump, while offensive powers offer abilities like blast, telekinesis, stomp, and buff. We also got hybrid powers like an AoE attack called Death from Above, and a force field that protects you as you zoom across Steelport. After extensively using these powers, I found this to be a well-rounded set. Each power has a different use case, like using telekinesis on that annoying spaceship, performing a stomp for crowd control, or using blast to cool down an overheating robot. Combining these powers can result in some devastating effects, like using telekinesis on enemies already on fire, or stomping enemies that are already on fire. I do wish these synergies were expanded upon though. Outside of a trophy I had to grind these out for. To add even more variety to the powers, each one comes with additional elements such as fire, electricity, or the ability to shrink your enemies. Considering Volition isn't known for this kind of gameplay, I thought they did a solid job making each power feel distinct. While the abilities themselves aren't groundbreaking, we've seen variations of them in other games, their integration into the Saints Row universe is well executed. The progression is also satisfying. You're not immediately OP when you unlock a new power. If we take Super Sprint for example, you're not going to be zooming around like the Flash until you upgrade your powers enough for them to become a vital part of your arsenal. While the powers are a fun addition to the game, they can make mechanics introduced in the last game obsolete. There's no point in quickly hijacking cars when I can get across the map in no time. I don't need to call my homies when I feel overwhelmed in combat, as I could just stomp enemies away. However, they are still in the game, so you can utilize some of these things. I just doubt most players will rely on them given the overwhelming convenience of superpowers. Some mechanics do make smart use of superpowers like takedowns. This was one of my favorite additions in Saints Row the Third, and I'm glad to see they have returned with beefy and over-the-top animations. Another consequence of the powers is how they affect the game's difficulty. Even though Saints Row has never been known for its challenge, once you have a few powers under your belt, you quickly become a one-man army capable of obliterating anything in your path. Some might find this makes the game too easy, and I can see why. I can't really recall a time when I felt I was in considerable danger in Saints Row 4, since I could get myself out of a jam in a moment's notice. However, the game does provide some challenging moments, both in a good way and a not so good way. The latter approach throws a ton of enemies your way, so ground troops, tanks, and spaceships are all shooting at you from every direction. A lot can happen in the moment, but it does feel cheap at times. Now and then, especially later in the game, you'll come across tougher aliens, murder bots, and other superpowered beings, which will keep you on your toes in a more satisfying way. Once you have every power at your disposal, along with a powerful alien arsenal, this all culminates in a chaotic thing of beauty. Without the superpowers though, the gameplay loop would have become repetitive pretty quickly. Another key aspect of Saints Row that's missing here is the gang aspect. The main enemy you're fighting throughout the game are the Zen. However, I personally don't see this as much of a criticism, and I don't think a lot of people do either. Given that we're in a simulation controlled by an alien overlord and the story the game tells, it wouldn't make sense to be fighting different alien factions or just gangs in general. Now, there are a handful of missions where we do fight random humans, and gangs from previous games do make a return in many ways that I will dive into later. While the variety of Zen you do fight isn't as varied as it could have been, I never grew bored taking them down. Again, there's different archetypes that you'll come across where you can utilize your powers and weapons in different ways. However, your powers are used for more than just combat and traversal. The game continues to elevate the fun factor with proper changes to activities and diversions. Familiar modes like Insurance Fraud and Mayhem return, alongside new additions, taking full advantage of our new powers. Insurance Fraud is the biggest benefactor here, letting you fling yourself across the map.
This is gonna hurt.
Mayhem comes in different flavors, using different weapons, vehicles, and superpowers to spice things up. There's a lot of variety here. It was easily the best iteration of fan favorite modes. While other activities like Escort aren't missing, there are plenty of new ones that I found to be solid replacements. 3 of them take place inside of a rift. Platforming Rift is a time challenge where you jump between platforms, racking up as many points in the shortest amount of time possible, which quickly became my favorite out of the 3. Speed Rift is similar to an endless runner where we have to avoid obstacles while collecting orbs. Finally, Telekinesis Rift has us throwing yellow and orange bombs at respective targets. This was my least favorite out of the 3 simply because there were times when too much was going on for me to keep up with. Professor Ginky's Mind Over Murder sees our favorite murderers cat return for even more violence and mayhem. The change here is that we throw pedestrians, cars, and Ginky heads at different color rings, which I thought was a nice change to an already fun activity. While the original version returns in a side mission, I do wish we could have seen Super Ethical Reality Climax return on a grander scale. Maybe instead of taking place in enclosed arenas, they happen in certain districts around the map. Just spitballing here. Blazin' is an on-foot race where we collect green orbs to increase our speed and finish the race as quickly as we can. Finally, Fight Club makes a return, but not in the way we remember it. Using our powers, we fight through 4 waves of increasingly tough enemies until we reach the final boss, which is a villain from previous games like Junichi. I found this to be an incredibly fun mode that I wish we could have gotten more of instead of just 3 missions. Before moving on, I want to quickly highlight the music and animations that close out activities, which I found to be awesome. This properly brings me to the music of Saints Row 4, which features some of the best songs in the series. Malcolm Kirby Jr. returns to compose the original score with a heavier focus on dubstep and lo-fi beats that fit perfectly with the game's vibe. This can be heard from the very beginning with a remixed version of the theme we got from Saints Row the Third, to just cruising around the open world. On the flip side is the licensed music. Before getting into what you'll hear on the radio, I want to go over the use of licensed music during the story missions. Despite there being more missions that utilize licensed music as a backdrop, they don't quite hit the highs of power or holding out for a hero blasting through my headset during those pivotal moments of Saints Row the Third. However, moments that stood out to me were Insane in the Brain playing during Shondi's rescue mission,
Hope this thing works.
or You've Got the Touch during the game's finale. The song that I think most players associate with this game has to be What Is Love, which caps off the first act.
Do a barrel roll.
Spin this ship, damn it!
While the song is catchy, I've always wondered why this is the song that many people think of when Saints Row 4 comes to mind. Looking at previous Saints Row games, it's clear which song defines those games and why. Saints Row the Third, Power. Saints Row 2, a little more complicated, and really any answer could go here, but I would argue that goes to I Love It by Young Jeezy. These are songs that have a prominent moment during the story or the first thing you hear when you start the game. In the case of What Is Love, from what I could find, it's not used in any of the marketing material, and aside from its use in IGN's review or it being brought up in passing, I can't find a clear reason as to why this song represents Saints Row 4. But I feel like I'm lingering on this topic for too long, so let's transition to the radio. Similar to Saints Row 2, each station's track list has popular hits that I feel can appeal to everyone. All the stations you know are here, with the only addition being Mad Decent, hosted by Riff Raff. Anyone else remember this man? I had a dubstep phase throughout most of my teenage years, so this station, along with K12, introduced me to songs that I still listen to on the regular. While I was listening to these two stations heavily throughout my time with Saints Row 4, I did switch things up from time to time. Hits that stood out to me included Walk the Moon on Gen X, Goldie on K-Rhyme,
Let's take it to the basis. You and them Mr. Greatness. My Martin was amazing. Rock on jealous with no laces.
or any classic on the mix.
This is my town.
The overall track list is on the shorter side with 109 songs, but to me, this is the best selection of music in the series, rivaling the likes of Saints Row 2. With that in mind, since you will be driving a car much in the game, you can listen to the radio while on foot, which was a smart decision that kept me engaged throughout the game's diversions, which haven't changed too much. Assassination and Chop Shop return, but not for the better. Assassination was especially disappointing because the feature that made it fun isn't here. No streaking or wearing a tank top to draw somebody out. It's now just a matter of going to a marker and fighting the target, which feels less imaginative. Some of them are questionable, quite literally, and others are fun throwbacks to previous games, like Julius Little. But this diversion overall feels like a missed opportunity. Chop Shop feels like one that could have been left out simply because driving isn't as crucial this time around. The vehicles you deliver do look cool, but doing this diversion to 100% the game slowed things down for me. If I wasn't going for the platinum, this is something I most likely would not have done. The Zen also have their own set of diversions like flashpoints to clear and towers to climb. Oh, see those blue things? Those are data clusters that are scattered throughout Steelport and are used to upgrade your superpowers. With over 1,000 to collect, these addictive little bits of code are essential for upgrading your powers. I made sure to collect them as I traversed Steelport to take full advantage of my powers and become an apex predator in the simulation. On top of that, regular upgrades to health, stamina, weapons, and the like are still here and require cash, along with being at a certain respect level, just like the third. These never felt out of place either. They complement your powers and weapons well, so it's just as important to upgrade them. All these aspects tie into the game's 66 challenges. If you messed around with this mechanic in the last game, some challenges will be familiar, like killing X number of enemies or getting gold in different activities. Others are tied to your superpowers, and I found this to be a fun incentive to use weapons and abilities that I wouldn't have considered using. However, a few are on the grindy side, like racking up 1,000 combined power kills or traveling 150,000 feet in an alien vehicle. For those not aiming for 100% completion, it won't be a big deal, but if you do, they can unlock some nice rewards. Much like the superpowers, the story of Saints Row 4 is another point of contention. While the tonal shift between Saints Row 2 and the third was jarring to some, Saints Row 4 jumps headfirst into the absurdity, pushing the series' zaniness to its limits. What began as a gritty tale of the Saints rising to power has now evolved into a full-blown sci-fi epic. Naturally, this led to mixed reactions. The narrative here isn't going to be for everyone, but for me, it's one of the more engaging stories in the franchise. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's okay. I get why fans might be divided on this one. While it might not hit the mark for everyone, I mostly enjoyed my experience from beginning to end. This begins with the prologue. Sometime after the Save Shaundi ending, we're dropped into the Middle East to stop a terrorist attack alongside MI6 agent Asha. As a jumping off point, this was one of the weaker sections of the game to me. Previous Saints Row games effectively set the stage with the prologues that made contextual sense, such as a prison escape or high-stakes bank heist. However, this one wasn't all that fun to me and honestly feels out of place when looking at the game as a whole. Taking a page out of Splinter Cell and Call of Duty's playbook, we stealth kill enemies and perform a slow motion breach before running into our old friend Cyrus Temple. Defeating him one last time in a QTE boss fight, he sets off a nuke aiming straight for the United States. As I Don't Want to Miss a Thing plays in the background, we listen to some heartfelt goodbyes before setting off the nuke.
Boss, you're right over the...
Crash landing inside the White House kicks off what is going to be a very, very wild ride. Fast forward a few years, and the boss is now president of the United States. Benjamin King is back, we told Keith David to end world hunger, and punch someone in the dick. This is sweet. Until it's not. The day has hardly begun when aliens invade Earth. Doing what I can to defend the White House, the Zen takes our friends, and we go face to face with our leader Zinyak, who proves to be an overwhelming opponent. Waking up to a sitcom called Leave It to the Saints, sponsored by Friendly Friar, we eat some pancakes, throw some more shade at Dex,
and someone named Dex stopped by earlier. I didn't recognize him, so I just sent him away.
And head to a diner. This is where the boss realizes things are not what they seem. Fighting for our lives, we hear Kenzie's familiar voice, who will become our guide throughout the mission and the rest of the game. As the mission comes to an end, Zinyak unveils that we are in one of many simulations before dropping us into his version of Steelport. It doesn't take long for things to get crazy. After a couple of missions where we get familiar with the basics, we eventually get our first superpower. And what better way to test it than with activities?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no.
Yes, missions centered around activities are back, and while this was an aspect of the last game I criticized heavily, they work out a lot better here. There are only a couple of missions during this act where it's the main objective. Since the activities play differently with superpowers, the gameplay feels fresh and varied, making it more engaging than it was before. The rest of this act is spent completing some busy work and gaining another power before Kinzie wakes us up in the mothership. Finding our way to Kinzie and Keith, we bear witness to possibly the biggest plot twist in the entire series.
You want me to leave a message? It's all gone.
Well, I'd say this was a productive day.
You're a fucking monster.
Oh, don't act surprised. I told you this would happen.
You killed 7 billion people.
Whoops.
Now it's a full-on fight to take down Zinyak. Act 2 is spent dismantling the simulation from the inside and rescuing our homies along the way. Each one is trapped in their own nightmare, taking us to some new and familiar locations. There's the Tron-like simulation for Matt, the nightclub from Saints Row 2 for Shaundi, and an almost faithful recreation of the road from the first game for Benjamin King. Not only do we visit these iconic locations, but we also get to fight iconic villains from those games, like Tanya, DJ Veteranchild, and Junichi. There's one mission I want to focus on, which is Shaundi's, appropriately named back by popular demand. What initially seems to set up Johnny Gat's return turns out to be Shaundi's nightmare. However, we aren't saving our current Shaundi. At first, it ends up being Shaundi from Saints Row 2. Not only was it a fun surprise, but this throwback is further elevated by Kinzie's reaction to all this.
Thanks for the help.
Anytime, Shaundi.
That is not Shaundi.
Actually, Kinzie, yeah, this is.
No, something's screwed up. Shaundi doesn't act like this. She has like one emotion, pissed.
While this rescue mission is the one that stood out to me, others I enjoyed playing through included the ones for Pierce, where we fight a giant Saints Flow can named Paul, Ben's nostalgic return to the row, and Matt's fourth wall-breaking Tron adventure. Playing through these missions brings up a topic I want to explore, which is nostalgia. Many of my favorite moments from Saints Row 4 dealt with returning characters and set pieces, and it's an aspect of the game I can appreciate much more now that I've played every game up to this point. However, to play devil's advocate, this can be seen as a point of contention and a knock on the story Saints Row 4 is trying to tell. An argument could be made that Volition is recycling old content due to the short development time the team had. For me though, I felt this was appropriate considering what the game was going for. I never thought it detracted from the story and every character had a reason to be here. It all feels like a celebration for a series that has grown so much since its inception. One of my favorite missions during this act capitalizes on this nostalgia. Zinyak catches wind of what we're doing and floods the simulation with every gang we've ever fought. Battling the Morningstar, Brotherhood, Ronin, and Vice Kings in the same game is a crossover I could have never imagined happening. We even face off against default boss characters from Saints Row 1 and 2, with the latter featuring a co-op partner, a cheeky meta reference to the earlier games.
Well, if it isn't the other Stillwater default player. Why are there two of me now?
Shit, it's the co-op player.
As we near the final stages of Act 2, our next mission is to rescue Johnny Gat. The mission does get off to a rocky start.
Saving Gat is a terrible idea.
The fuck's got into you?
You're out of line.
Boss don't answer to you, honey. Bitch, you lucky we're standing in front of Keith David or...
Stop it! He's right, okay? It's a terrible idea. In order to save Johnny, we have to tap directly from our ship into his mind, and that means Zinyak's going to know exactly where we are. You're asking Matt and I to paint a target on humanity's last chance so that you can go rescue someone we've never even met. And what's even stupider is that we're going along with it.
However, once everyone comes to terms with the situation, this kickstarts a very unique mission. The very next day highlights one of the strengths Saints Row 4 has, which was the fascinating way it changes up the gameplay formula. The first half plays out as a side-scrolling beat-em-up where we fight alongside Johnny against Vice Kings and Ronin. The second half switches things up, putting us in a mech suit as we save Johnny in true Saints Row style. These creative changes in gameplay help keep the experience fresh and fun throughout. Of course, Johnny's return also brings up one of the most controversial choices in the entire series: how he survived the events of Saints Row III. While the game didn't explicitly kill off his character, it was just implied given that we threw a funeral for him and that he returns as a zombie homie in the end. Here, the game does provide a plausible explanation of how he survived up until Zinyak arrives.
Bravo! It would seem your reputation doesn't do you justice.
His appearance is a blatant retcon and introduces a few plot holes, but if that means getting a fan favorite character back, then I don't really mind. With all the homies back, this leads us into Act 3. But before diving into that, I want to talk about the game's side missions and the newly introduced loyalty missions. Saints Row 4 shifts to a more quest-like structure, which is noticeable during the side missions. These aren't anything special. It pretty much has us complete a different set of activities and diversions in the open world. It's essentially busy work, and if you're trying to 100% the game, it does help get these done. Completing these missions also unlocks some cool rewards, like different elements for your powers and unique outfits. On the other hand, the loyalty missions are where the game shines, offering some of the best side content. If you've played games like Mass Effect, the term loyalty missions might conjure up deeper narrative consequences, but that's not the case here. These missions don't affect the story's outcome or determine a character's allegiance. Instead, they're fun one-on-one missions with your homies, with some nostalgia thrown into the mix. Each character, except for Sid and Keith, has a fun mission in store, like reenacting an episode of Nightblade with Matt, killing mascots and murder brawl with Johnny, escorting a VIP with Asha, or stopping Cyrus one last time for Kenzie. Of all the loyalty missions, Pierce, Ben, and Shondi stood out the most. Pierce's mission is simple. We stop the Brotherhood's antics, culminating in a final fight with a super-powered Marrow. At one point, Pierce and I get to jam out just like the old days.
You got what I need.
What the fuck is that?
And you say he's just a friend. And you say he's just a friend. You got what I need. And you say he's just a friend. And you say he's just a friend.
Ben's mission involves taking down Tanya, but the twist is that our clothes randomly change after absorbing a virus from different targets. This sets up the boss's perfect dream where they perform during a strip club's amateur night.
I'm in the zone, Ben!
That's right. Let me hear your adulation. Let me feel your adulation.
Then there's Shondi's loyalty mission, which was my favorite. Featuring both Shondis, they slowly bond, through drugs of course, leading to another fight with DJ Veteran Child. These loyalty missions aren't just fun excuses to hang out with your homies. They also grant them superpowers, making them formidable allies if you take them into the open world. While I have mentioned in previous videos that I don't use the homie system much, if it wasn't for a couple of trophies, I would have missed out on some unique interactions. Bringing different homies along unlocks fascinating banter, like Johnny and Shondi.
Well, what did you expect? I thought I listened to you die. I thought that if we'd only gone back for you, we could have stopped it.
Yeah, whoa, hold up. I'm right here.
Each villain from Saints Row 1.
Look, Tanya, what's done is done. We've had our beef and shit got settled. Multiple times, in fact. What you did back in Stillwater, I'm over it.
Wow, that's really big of you, Ben.
Mira and DJ Veteran Child.
Jessica liked that gift I sent over?
She did. Though how'd you find it?
Had to pull a few strings to get the whole set, but I have my connections.
Or Julius Little and Keith David.
Keith David. I'm a fan. Thank you. That's very kind. You know, some folks say I remind them of you. Yeah, I get the same with you. I don't see it then. Me neither.
There are dozens of combinations you can come up with, and it's worth checking out a YouTube video if you're interested. There's some interesting combos I wouldn't have thought about. Back on the mothership, you can chat with your homies or romance them if you want. It's another clear parody of Mass Effect and other RPGs with the romance system, but it's played entirely for laughs. You don't see any of the action, and for some characters, it's not even remotely about sex. It's a quirky, odd inclusion that I mostly found amusing, though I'll admit it felt awkward with characters like Johnny. If it weren't for the trophies, I probably wouldn't have explored this feature that much. Moving into Act 3, we are one step closer to stopping Zinyak. But it's never that simple. The Zen invade, a traitor is on the loose, Kinsey gets captured, and Roddy Piper shows up for some reason. This stretch of missions was fun, packed with challenges, and my souped up homies holding their own. My one gripe is how Keith David's portrayal was handled. While I don't think it's far-fetched, the resolution felt rushed. I would have preferred an extra mission or two to flesh out this subplot some more. However, once everything is resolved, we create a key to overload the simulation, setting the stage for the final showdown with the Zen Empire.
I know over the years you've heard this speech a bunch of times.
Heard it. Bitch, I wrote it.
But we need to remember why we do what we do. And today the stakes are even higher. Earth is gone. It's not coming back, and nothing we do today is gonna change that. But one thing we can do is get revenge. And you better believe we're showing this motherfucker humanity isn't dead because we're still alive. This isn't about hope or faith or even about winning. Kinsey's right. Those things died on Earth. This is about will. This is about saying, I don't give a shit how many times you knock me down. If I'm still breathing, I'm standing right back up. And you know what? You can hit as hard as you want, because when I hit back, I'm gonna lay your ass out, bitch. It's our time now. Let's get this shit started.
The last mission is divided into 3 phases, and you get some freedom in choosing which homies to take along. For phase 1, I chose Matt and Asha to help deliver the key. Ben and Johnny overload the simulation during phase 2, while Shawnee and Pierce get me onto the mothership in phase 3. Out of these phases, the second one was easily my favorite. Having Ben and Johnny creating mayhem alongside me with Blow the Roof hyping me up encapsulates everything I love about this game. To cap off phase 2, there's even this Easter egg-filled debug screen as the simulation collapses before we're taken back to literally the very beginning with Saints Row 1. After reaching the mothership, some power armor is waiting to be used, giving me all the abilities from the simulation and leveling out the playing field. It was a long road to get here, but after all this time, we came face to face with Zinyak. The final fight was intense, with Zinyak in his own set of power armor and waves of aliens swarming me on tight platforms. At times, it got overwhelming, but when my superpowered friends joined the fight, they quickly turned the tide and I was able to focus all my attention on Zinyak. Defeating him, we delivered the final gruesome blow to this alien overlord with the entire Zen Empire watching.
You can't kill me. My people will avenge my death.
He's running shit now.
With his empire now under my control, we take some of their gadgets for a spin, with time travel being first on the list. We see these hijinks play out in the credits, but not before witnessing an awesome ending with everyone just having fun together one last time. I don't know what it was, but this ending got me emotional. After spending so much time with these characters over the years, watching how far they've come, it felt like a fitting send-off. This entire journey was something special, and while my time with the series isn't over yet, this is the last time we'll see this particular crew together, and I'm really gonna miss them. Ultimately, I had a blast with Saints Row 4. Compared to my first playthrough over a decade ago, I now have a deeper appreciation for the story after playing all the previous games. Despite a few rough patches, I found the narrative more cohesive than the one in Saints Row 3. Going into it, I was worried this particular aspect might not hold up, but I was pleasantly surprised by how well it did. If you were to focus solely on the main missions, Saints Row 4 is probably the shortest game in the series. However, this brevity works to its advantage, creating a tight, cohesive, and well-paced narrative. There's no unnecessary filler to bog things down, allowing the game to focus on its strengths, the fun, and most importantly, the characters. Out of the 4 games so far, this story is one of my favorites. Again, the whole premise behind this game is undeniably outlandish compared to previous entries, but it still feels true to the essence of the series. I think in Saints Row 3's attempt to go all out, the narrative occasionally gets lost in the spectacle. Here, everything Saints Row 3 aimed to achieve works far better. The linearity of the storyline, the sharpness of the writing, and the depth of the character development comes together seamlessly. I want to focus on that last point. The characters truly shine in this game. With a few exceptions, the characterization in Saints Row 3 was arguably the weakest in the series, but Saints Row 4 manages to address this. The characters actually evolve as the story unfolds, and this growth is especially apparent towards the end of the game. While there were many bumps in the road, the Saints slowly rallied together over the course of the story, making their teamwork and camaraderie feel earned. Despite the utterly absurd circumstances, the characters wear their hearts on their sleeves, reminding me of the emotional core of the earlier Saints Row games. It's this element of heart that brought a sense of comfort and familiarity, even as the series embraced its bold, new direction. It isn't without scrutiny though. I can admit, it's a story that feels disconnected from the series' humble roots. The over-the-top alien invasion and simulations are far removed from the gang wars of Stillwater. But to say that this isn't a Saints Row game wouldn't be fair. Again, it still has that Saints Row magic that sets the series apart from many other open-world games. This all leads to the big question: where could the series go from here? With it being more than a decade since Saints Row 4 was released, we unfortunately have that answer, but at the time, this was a legitimate concern. This game jumped the shark in many ways, and with THQ's financial troubles, Volition was in a strange position. Luckily, we know what they were working on immediately after Saints Row 4 wrapped things up.
So, what exactly is Enter the Dominatrix?
Saints Row 4 came with 2 sets of DLC and an expansion, adding even more chaos to an already wild game. Let's start with Enter the Dominatrix. Released on October 22nd, 2013, this DLC gives us a glimpse into what was originally planned as an expansion for Saints Row 3. The cutscenes are presented as a documentary that loosely takes us through the scrapped content. Some familiar faces return, like Zemos and Donnie, and together we face off against an AI who takes the form of, well, a dominatrix. The story is bizarre, with moments like rescuing our friends from questionable devices, visiting a sex club complete with a throne made of dildos, flying through the brain of a saint's flow can, and even riding dinosaurs. Yeah, it's very strange. I did enjoy how the DLC was presented, with cutscenes mixing live action behind the scenes footage and voiced concept art. It gives off the vibe that we're playing through a set of lost levels. As a whole, the DLC was fun, but it started to lose steam towards the end for me. On the other hand, how the Saints saved Christmas was more up my alley.
Boss, are you gonna help or what?
I wasn't planning on it.
Come on, don't be such a Grinch.
I don't even know what that means.
Released on December 10th, 2013, this DLC starts with the crew decorating the ship while the boss acts like a Scrooge. Not that they would know who that is. This all gets interrupted by yet another version of Shondi, this time from the future, who warns us about Claus, a demonic doppelganger of the real Santa Claus. This holiday-themed DLC takes us to places beyond Steelport, like a town that's lost its Christmas spirit, and Santa's workshop. The Christmas setting is fully embraced as we fight gingerbread men, nutcrackers, and elves, and even deliver presents using a sleigh in a fun activity. It also comes with plenty of Easter eggs referencing a Christmas story, like getting a BB gun, getting shot in the eye with one, and licking a pole after a triple dog dare. This all came together to create a lighthearted, creative, and festive DLC perfect for the holiday season. Now, let's talk about Saints Row 4's big expansion, Gat Out of Hell, which serves as an epilogue to the series. Quick history lesson. Gat Out of Hell was unofficially announced in December 2013 when Jay Moore, the voice of Dane Vogel from Saints Row 2, teased his return to the franchise. Volition confirmed the standalone expansion at PAX Prime 2014, and it was released on January 20th, 2015 for both 7th and 8th generation consoles. Inspiration for this DLC came from an unlikely source, Disney. In an interview with Polygon, creative director Steve Jaros explained how his love for Disney classics was the inspiration for Gat Out of Hell. He, quote, wanted Gat Out of Hell to feel like a Disney movie, a Disney fairy tale, with whimsical love songs, so we got to play with a lot of tropes that are standard in the fairy tale space. Most of Gat Out of Hell's story is based on Sleeping Beauty, and this is evident right from the start. At Kenzie's birthday party, the crew plays with a Ouija board, accidentally opening a portal to hell that sucks the boss in.
Jezebel? Who the fuck is...
Now it's up to Johnny and Kenzie to jump straight into hell and rescue the boss. Even though it's a standalone expansion, I'm including it in this video because there's not much new stuff that warrants its own video, at least to me. Starting with the change of setting, New Hades is an interesting map to explore with some areas that do stand out. It is smaller than Steelport, which makes sense, but similar to Saints Row 4, the towering skyscrapers that we can climb give the city some verticality. The gameplay is still great, and there are new weapons that tie into the 7 deadly sins, which were a nice creative twist and my favorite part of the expansion. Superpowers make a return with a couple of new additions. You get a pair of wings this time, which I found to be a better way of traversing the map compared to gliding in Saints Row 4. There's more thought put into this mechanic than I was expecting. You have to maintain your altitude and speed so you don't stall out, and different tricks keep you in the air longer, which I found to be nice. The other new power lets you summon minions to aid you in battle and comes in handy when things get overwhelming. Similar to Saints Row 4, New Hades is packed with soul clusters that are used to upgrade our powers. These powers also come with elements like before and are unlocked during activities, the main draw to this expansion. I remember back in 2015 when this was released, I wasn't a big fan of the activities, so I was immediately turned off by this premise at the time. Even now, I feel relying so heavily on activities and diversions wasn't the best call, since this unfortunately means there isn't really a lot in terms of story. The premise is simple: stop Satan. Along the way, you encounter familiar faces like Dane Vogel and the Winter Sisters, along with new ones like Blackbeard and Shakespeare. Yes, you heard that right. As odd as that is, it pales in comparison to the musical number that takes place in the middle of the story.
The bus is counting on us!
You think I don't know? How do I burn down a city that's baptized in fire? How do I kill off an army that's dead? Time's slipping away now, and the best plan we've got is just put one inside Satan's head.
Playing activities and diversions builds a meter that must be filled before we can defeat Satan. Of course, insurance fraud and mayhem are here, but new activities like Hellblazing and Salvation make great use of our wings. There are some interesting diversions too, like Pledge Rush, Barnstorming, and Killing Decks.
You hate me working for Altor? The fuck you think you're doing?
Speaking of which, why was this the only content where we heard from Dex outside of the Saints Row 2 DLC? After this meter is full, we can go toe-to-toe with Satan in a boss fight that was pretty easy for me since I had everything upgraded. After defeating him, everyone except Johnny is sent back home. Johnny is presented by God with 5 different choices.
If you want God to recreate the Earth, but in doing so retcon the entire world of Saints Row, turn to page 124.
While this is the canon ending, I chose the one where Johnny reunites with Aisha in heaven, which I thought was a perfect send-off for his character. If you end up wanting even more content from this expansion, there are a staggering 101 challenges that can be completed. For such a small package, I have no idea how Volition was able to come up with this many challenges. They're mostly fun and encourage you to use your powers, but they seem geared towards completionists. If I wasn't chasing the Platinum Trophy, I doubt I would have completed even half of them, since the kill-related challenges required replaying the same diversions repeatedly. I did appreciate being able to pin specific challenges to the screen though, a feature that I've wanted since Saints Row 3. While I spent about 20 hours playing Gat Out of Hell, mostly for the Platinum, the expansion itself can be finished in around 5 hours if you just stick to the main content. However, relying so heavily on activities and diversions means the story takes a back seat, which leads me to its critical reception. Sitting at a 64 on Metacritic, Gat Out of Hell is the lowest rated entry I've covered in the series so far. The main criticism seems to be that it feels like a reskin of old content with too much focus on the same activities. While I agree that focusing on activities wasn't the best idea, I still found fun in my playthrough, even if it's probably the weakest Saints Row content I've experienced up to this point. I realize it's just an expansion, so comparing it to the full game might seem unfair. But in a world full of expansions that add new and interesting content to the base game, Gat Out of Hell's criticisms can be justified. If you're someone looking for a bit more story, this might not be worth a download, and watching the endings on YouTube could be just as satisfying. However, if you're a fan of the gameplay in Saints Row 4, you'll still likely have a good time. At the end of the day, Saints Row 4 is a much better game than I remember, and certainly better than it's often given credit for. I'd even argue it's one of the stronger entries in the series. Now, I know a lot of fans might disagree, and again, that's completely fine. It's evident that Saints Row 4 rubs some fans the wrong way, and their feelings are completely valid. Given the financial issues that plagued THQ at the time, it's clear Volition had to make the best of what they had. But despite those challenges, I believe the team crafted something that feels worthy of the Saints Row name. Sure, they could have done more to make Steelport less bland, and a few more gameplay innovations would have been welcome. But when I look at the game as a whole, it stands strong in my eyes. My 25-hour journey through it was a blast, and it's bittersweet knowing that this is the last game with the Saints we've come to love. Playing through the previous games has been some of the most fun I've had with the series in a long time. While it's hard to say goodbye to the Saints as we know them, I'm excited to continue exploring the rest of the series in the future.